She reached into her last $20 to help a stranger in a wheelchair, not knowing he was the billionaire CEO who would change her life forever. The rain came down in sheets that November evening, turning the city sidewalk into a river of neon reflections and rushing strangers. Maya Chen stood under the flickering awning of a closed bookstore, her worn sneakers soaked through, her jacket thin as paper, doing nothing against the cold that bit through to her bones. She clutched a small paper bag, holding a day-old sandwich and an apple, her dinner purchased with the last few dollars from her weekly budget. 23 years old, working 2 jobs and still barely scraping by. But Maya had learned long ago that survival wasn't about what you had, it was about what you refused to give up. Stay with me. What happens next will shatter everything you think you know about kindness, desperation, and the invisible threads that connect us all. Across the street, through the curtain of rain, she noticed something that made her pause. A man in a wheelchair alone, struggling to navigate the steep ramp leading to the subway entrance. The wheelchair kept rolling backward, the wet incline too slick, too steep. He pushed forward, his arms straining, only to slide back again. Once, twice, 3 times. People rushed past him, umbrellas tilted forward, eyes down, lost in their own worlds. No one stopped. No one even looked. Maya watched for a moment, her heart clenching in that familiar way it did when she saw someone else's pain. She knew that feeling of being invisible, of fighting alone while the world moved on without you. She had felt it every day since her mother passed away 2 years ago, leaving her with nothing but medical debt and memories. She felt it every morning when she woke up in her tiny studio apartment with the broken heater, every night when she counted coins to see if she could afford both food and bus fare. But watching this stranger struggle in the rain, something inside her refused to look away. Without thinking, Maya stepped off the curb and into the downpour. The rain soaked her immediately, cold water running down her neck, but she didn't care. She crossed the street, dodging a taxi that honked angrily, and approached the man from behind. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with silver hair plastered to his forehead and an expensive suit that was now completely drenched. His hands were raw and red from gripping the wheelchair's rims, his breathing labored. Up close, she could see the frustration etched into every line of his face, the exhaustion in his shoulders. "Hey," Maya called out over the sound of the rain. "Let me help you." The man turned, startled, his eyes meeting hers. They were grey, storm cloud grey, and for a moment they held something Maya couldn't quite name. Surprise? Suspicion? But then his expression softened and he nodded, too tired to argue. Maya grabbed the handles of the wheelchair and leaned her weight into it, pushing with everything she had. Her arms burned, her feet slipped on the wet pavement, but she kept pushing. Inch by inch they climbed that ramp together, the man's hands helping to guide the wheels, Maya's strength making up for what the incline stole. When they finally reached the top, both of them were breathing hard. The man turned the wheelchair around to face her, and for the first time, Maya saw gratitude in those grey eyes. Real, genuine gratitude. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "You didn't have to do that." Maya shrugged, water dripping from her hair. "Yes, I did," she replied simply. Because that was the truth. In a world that had shown her so little mercy, she refused to become one more person who looked away. The man studied her for a moment, taking in her soaked clothes, the worn fabric of her jacket, the paper bag she still clutched in one hand. "You're soaking wet," he observed. "Let me at least buy you a coffee, warm you up." Maya shook her head. "I'm okay. Really. You take care of yourself." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Wait. What's your name?" She hesitated, then looked back over her shoulder. Maya Chen." He nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory. "Thank you, Maya Chen. You have no idea what you just did for me." She smiled, a small, tired smile. "I hope your day gets better." And then she was gone, disappearing back into the rain, back to her life of struggle and survival, never knowing that the man she had helped was Richard Westbrook, CEO of Westbrook Industries, a company worth $12 billion and employing over 50,000 people worldwide. Richard sat there in the rain for a long moment after she left, his hands still trembling from the effort of that climb, but his mind racing with something else entirely, something that felt like shame and wonder all mixed together. He had spent the last 3 months in this wheelchair after a car accident shattered his spine, told by doctors that he might never walk again. He had spent those months learning what it meant to be invisible, to be ignored, to have doors close in his face and people speak over him as if he wasn't there. And in all that time, surrounded by assistants and executives and people paid to help him, not one person had made him feel as seen as this young woman, with nothing to her name, who had stepped into the rain without hesitation. Richard Westbrook hadn't become a billionaire by ignoring opportunity or overlooking talent. He had built his empire by recognizing value where others saw nothing, by investing in people when everyone else walked away. And something about Maya Chen, something about the way she had helped him without expecting anything in return, without even knowing who he was, had stirred something in him he thought he'd lost. A memory of why he had started his company in the first place, decades ago, when he was young and hungry and determined to prove that success wasn't about stepping on others, but about lifting them up. He pulled out his phone, water droplets sliding across the screen, and made a call to his assistant. "Jennifer, I need you to find someone for me. Maya Chen, early 20s, works somewhere in the downtown area, probably multiple jobs. I want everything you can find, but I want it done quietly, respectfully, no invasions of privacy, just enough to locate her." There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, is everything all right?" Richard looked at the ramp behind him, the one he couldn't climb alone, the one Maya had conquered with nothing but determination and kindness. "Everything's fine," he said quietly. "I just met someone who reminded me what integrity looks like, and I want to thank her properly." But gratitude wasn't the only thing on Richard's mind, because in that brief encounter, in those few minutes of struggle and connection, he had seen something in Maya that most people never revealed, a strength that came not from privilege or advantage, but from surviving when the world told you to give up, a compassion that existed despite hardship, not because of comfort. And Richard Westbrook knew, with the certainty of someone who had spent a lifetime reading people, that Maya Chen was exactly the kind of person the world needed more of, the kind of person worth investing in, the kind of person whose story was just beginning. What Maya didn't know as she made her way home through the rain, her clothes clinging to her skin, her stomach growling because she'd given her last few dollars to help push that wheelchair up the ramp when she realized the man had dropped his wallet, was that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. That the simple act of kindness she had shown, expecting nothing and wanting nothing, would set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything she believed about herself, about success, about what she deserved. But that revelation was still hours away, waiting in the wings like a secret the universe wasn't quite ready to tell. Maya arrived at her apartment building just after 8 o'clock, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely fit the key into the lock. The building was old, one of those structures the city forgot about, with peeling paint and a permanent smell of mildew in the hallways. Her studio was on the 4th floor, no elevator, and by the time she climbed the stairs, her legs felt like lead. She pushed open the door to find the same scene she left that morning, a single room with a mattress on the floor, a hot plate on a wooden crate, a small table with one chair, and walls so thin she could hear her neighbor's television through the plaster. This was home. This was all she had, and most days it felt like more than she deserved. She peeled off her wet clothes and hung them over the bathroom door, then wrapped herself in the only towel she owned that wasn't threadbare. The heater didn't work, hadn't worked in months, and the landlord kept promising to fix it next week, always next week. Maya sat on the edge of her mattress, her body shaking from cold and exhaustion, and unwrapped the sandwich she'd saved for dinner. Half of it was soggy from the rain, but she ate it anyway, slowly, making it last, because this was all there would be until her shift tomorrow at the diner. How did life become this small? How did dreams shrink into just hoping to survive another day? She remembered being 17, graduating high school with honors, her mother beaming with pride, talking about college and futures and all the possibilities that seemed to stretch out forever. But then her mother got sick, cancer that came fast and cruel, and Maya had watched scholarships disappear into medical bills, watched her future dissolve into hospital rooms and insurance denials, and finally into a grave she still couldn't afford a proper headstone for. 6 years later, here she was, 23 and feeling ancient, working as a waitress and a night clerk at a convenience store, living in a room that cost more than she could afford and still not enough to be livable. But Maya had learned something important in those years of loss and struggle. She had learned that kindness cost nothing, and sometimes it was the only currency that mattered. She had learned that helping someone else, even when you had nothing to give, made you feel less empty inside. It reminded you that you were still human, still connected to something larger than your own pain. That's why she had stopped for the man in the wheelchair. Not because she expected a reward, not because she thought it would change anything, but because in that moment helping him had made her feel less alone in the world. And that was worth more than money could buy. Sharing these heartbreaking stories isn't easy, but if you feel the weight of these hidden struggles, if you've ever helped someone when you had nothing left to give, subscribe and join us. Your like can spread empathy, and your comment can share a story that touches another soul. Because these moments of human connection, these small acts of grace, they matter more than we'll ever know. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the glittering skyline, Richard Westbrook sat in his study, a glass of bourbon untouched on the desk beside him, his eyes fixed on the file his assistant had compiled. Maya Chen, 23 years old. Mother deceased, no other family on record. High school valedictorian, full academic scholarship to State University, withdrawn after one semester due to financial hardship. Currently employed at Rosie's Diner on 5th Street and Mike's Convenience Store on Avenue B, working a combined 70 hours per week. No criminal record, no debts beyond her mother's medical bills, which she'd been paying off in small increments for 2 years. Current residence, a studio apartment in a building that had 17 health code violations on file. Richard read through the information twice, his jaw tightening with each detail. This young woman, brilliant enough to earn a full scholarship, working herself to exhaustion just to survive, had stopped in the pouring rain to help him when she clearly had nothing to spare, had helped him without knowing who he was, without calculating what she might gain. In his world, a world of corporate ladders and calculated moves, genuine altruism was so rare it felt almost fictional. But Maya Chen had shown him it still existed, still thrived even in the hardest circumstances, maybe especially in the hardest circumstances. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of human resources. "Michael, it's Richard. I need you to do something for me tomorrow morning, first thing. I'm sending you a file. Review it tonight. This person, Maya Chen, I want her brought in for an interview. Executive assistant position reporting directly to me." There was a long pause. "Sir, we already have 3 executive assistants on your team, and we haven't posted any openings. Also, this candidate has no college degree, no corporate experience, no relevant background for that level position. I don't understand." Richard smiled for the first time in months. "You're right, Michael. On paper, she's completely unqualified. But I'm not hiring a resume, I'm hiring a person, someone with integrity, courage, and compassion, someone who does the right thing when no one's watching and there's nothing to gain. Those qualities can't be taught in business school, and they're worth more than any MBA. Michael hesitated. "Sir, with all due respect, you met this person once for what, 5 minutes in the rain? How can you possibly know she possesses these qualities based on one interaction?" Richard looked out the window at the city below. Thousands of lights representing thousands of lives, each one carrying burdens he would never know. "Because, Michael, in my experience, you can learn more about a person's character in 5 minutes of crisis than in 5 years of comfort. Bring her in, make it happen." He hung up before Michael could protest further. But Richard's plan went deeper than simple gratitude. He had spent the evening thinking about Maya, about what she represented, about the thousands of people like her who were drowning in a system that rewarded privilege and ignored potential. People who worked themselves to the bone and still couldn't get ahead, not because they lacked talent or drive, but because they lacked opportunity. Because the doors that opened for people like him, people born into wealth and connections, remained locked for people like Maya. And he had the power to open one of those doors. Maybe it wouldn't change the world, but it might change one life. And wasn't that where all change began? One life at a time, one act of recognition at a time. The next morning, Maya woke to her alarm at 5:30, her body aching from yesterday's double shift. She had 3 hours before her shift at the diner started, just enough time to grab a shower, choke down some instant coffee, and take the bus across town. She was pulling on her waitress uniform, the white button-up shirt she'd washed by hand the night before, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, assuming it was a spam call, but something made her pick up. "Hello?" a professional female voice responded. "Is this Maya Chen?" "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Jennifer Park. I'm calling from Westbrook Industries. We'd like to invite you to come in for an interview this afternoon at 2 o'clock for an executive assistant position. Would you be available?" Maya stood there in her tiny apartment, the phone pressed to her ear, convinced she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what? Westbrook Industries? There must be some mistake. I never applied for any position there. I don't even have a college degree." Jennifer's voice remained calm, warm even. "There's no mistake, Ms. Chen. Mr. Westbrook himself requested this interview. He was very specific. 2 o'clock this afternoon, 14th floor, downtown headquarters. Can we expect you?" Maya's mind raced. Westbrook Industries. The Westbrook Industries? One of the biggest corporations in the country. This had to be a scam, some kind of sick joke. "I don't understand. Why would Richard Westbrook want to interview me? How does he even know I exist?" There was a pause, and then Jennifer said something that made Maya's heart stop. "He said you helped him yesterday evening, in the rain, at the subway entrance. He said you showed him what integrity looks like, and he doesn't forget people like that. So, Ms. Chen, will you come?" The man in the wheelchair. The stranger she'd helped up the ramp. That was Richard Westbrook, the billionaire CEO? Maya felt dizzy, leaning against the wall for support. "I can't come at 2. I have a shift at the diner. I can't afford to lose that job." Jennifer's response was immediate. "We'll compensate you for any lost wages from missing your shift. Please, Ms. Chen. Mr. Westbrook rarely makes requests like this. It would mean a great deal to him if you'd come." Maya closed her eyes, 1,000 thoughts swirling through her mind. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Billionaires didn't track down waitresses who helped them in the rain and offer them corporate jobs. Did they? But the voice on the phone sounded genuine, professional, real. And what did she have to lose? Her pride? She'd lost that years ago. Her dignity. That was already hanging by a thread. Maybe this was a scam. Maybe she'd show up and be humiliated, but maybe, just maybe, this was the universe finally throwing her a rope when she was drowning. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll be there at 2. "Excellent. Ask for me at the reception desk, Jennifer Park. I'll escort you up personally. And Ms. Chen, wear whatever makes you comfortable. This isn't about appearances." Maya hung up and stared at her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. A young woman with dark circles under her eyes, cheap uniform, hands rough from washing dishes, looked back at her. What was she walking into? What did Richard Westbrook really want? And why did the idea of hope, after so many years without it, feel more terrifying than anything else? Maya stood outside the gleaming tower of Westbrook Industries at exactly 1:55 that afternoon, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The building stretched up into the sky like a monument to everything she wasn't, all glass and steel and power, reflecting clouds and ambition in equal measure. People in expensive suits streamed in and out through revolving doors, everyone moving with purpose, with confidence, with the kind of certainty that came from knowing exactly where they belonged in the world. And here she was, wearing the only dress she owned, a simple navy blue thing she'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago for her mother's funeral, her shoes polished but clearly worn, her hands trembling as she clutched a small purse that contained nothing but her ID and emergency bus fare. "What am I doing here?" The question screamed through her mind. "This is insane. I should turn around right now, go back to my real life, stop pretending I could ever be part of this world." But something kept her feet moving forward, through those revolving doors, into a lobby that looked like it cost more than her entire neighborhood. Marble floors, massive chandeliers, a waterfall feature along one wall that probably used more water in a day than she used in a month. The reception desk sat at the center like a throne, staffed by two impeccably dressed women who looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Maya approached on shaking legs, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi, I'm here to see Jennifer Park. I have a 2 o'clock appointment." One of the receptionists looked up, her professional smile never wavering, and picked up a phone. "Miss Park, your 2 o'clock is here in the lobby." She hung up and nodded at Maya. "She'll be right down. Please have a seat." Maya perched on the edge of a leather couch that probably cost more than 6 months of her rent, watching the parade of corporate life move around her. Everyone looked so polished, so together, like they'd been born knowing the secret codes and languages of success. She felt like an imposter, a fraud, someone who'd wandered onto a movie set and was about to be escorted out by security. 5 minutes later, a woman in her 40s emerged from the elevator, professional but warm, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. "Maya Chen, I'm Jennifer Park. Thank you so much for coming." She extended her hand, and Maya shook it, trying to hide how much her own hand was trembling. Jennifer didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she was kind enough not to mention it. "Follow me. Mr. Westbrook is expecting you." They rode the elevator in silence, Maya watching the numbers climb, 14 floors up, each one taking her further from the world she knew. The doors opened onto an executive floor that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, artwork on the walls that looked like it belonged in museums. A quiet elegance that spoke of money so old it didn't need to announce itself. Jennifer led her down a hallway and paused outside a large oak door. "Mr. Westbrook is inside. Don't be nervous. He's actually quite kind, despite what the media might say about him. Just be yourself." She knocked twice and opened the door. The office beyond was enormous, but somehow not intimidating. Books lined one wall, a sitting area with comfortable chairs occupied another, and behind a massive desk sat the man from the rain. Richard Westbrook. But he wasn't behind the desk anymore. He'd wheeled himself around to the front, positioning himself at eye level. And when he saw Maya, his entire face lit up with recognition and something that looked almost like relief. "Maya Chen," he said, his voice warm. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." He gestured to one of the chairs. Maya sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, trying desperately to look like she belonged there. Jennifer quietly excused herself and closed the door, leaving them alone. Richard studied Maya for a long moment, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen, truly seen, maybe for the first time in years. "I imagine you're confused about why you're here," he began. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. "I'm here because yesterday in the rain, when I was struggling and invisible to everyone else, you stopped. You helped me without knowing who I was, without calculating what you might gain, without hesitation. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Maya found her voice, though it came out shakier than she wanted. "I just did what anyone should do." Richard smiled, but there was sadness in it. "That's exactly my point. You did what everyone should do, but almost no one does. And I've spent the last 24 hours thinking about that, about you, about what it means." He wheeled closer, his grey eyes intense. "I looked into your background, Maya. I hope you don't mind, but I needed to understand who you are. High school valedictorian, full scholarship, dreams of becoming a teacher. And then life happened. Your mother got sick, and you sacrificed everything to take care of her. You've been working 2 jobs for years, barely surviving, and yet yesterday you stopped to help a stranger." Tears burned in Maya's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. How did he know all this? How had he seen so clearly into the life she tried so hard to hide? "Why does any of that matter to you?" she asked, her voice breaking. Richard leaned back, choosing his words carefully. "Because, Maya, I built this company on a principle that somewhere along the way, I think I forgot. That success isn't about stepping on people to climb higher. It's about reaching down and pulling others up with you. That the true measure of character isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when no one is, when there's nothing to gain and everything to lose. You reminded me of that." He reached for a folder on his desk and slid it across to her. "I want to offer you a position here, executive assistant, reporting directly to me. The salary is $120,000 a year to start, full benefits, healthcare, retirement plan, education assistance if you want to go back to school. You'll learn every aspect of this business, work alongside people who've spent decades in corporate environments, and I'll mentor you personally. Maya stared at the folder like it might explode. $120,000. That was more money than she'd made in the last 5 years combined. This couldn't be real. Mr. Westbrook, I don't have any experience. I don't have a degree. I don't know anything about corporate business or being an executive assistant. Why would you offer this to me? Richard's expression grew serious. Because, Maya, I can teach you business. I can teach you systems and processes and corporate structure, but I cannot teach integrity. I cannot teach compassion. I cannot teach the kind of courage it takes to help someone when you're barely surviving yourself. Those qualities are innate, and they're worth more than any resume. This company, any company, needs people like you. Not more yes men, not more calculators, but people who remember what it means to be human. Maya's hands shook as she opened the folder, scanning the contract inside, the numbers that looked like a different language, the benefits that seemed impossible. Her mind screamed that this was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch, that people didn't just hand you a new life because you helped them up a ramp. I don't understand why you're doing this, she whispered. If you've ever felt the weight of invisible struggles, if you've ever wondered whether kindness matters, in a world that seems to reward only ambition, stay with us. Subscribe, leave your thoughts below, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about opportunity and the power of one moment to change everything. Your story matters too, and together we celebrate the moments that remind us we're all connected. Richard wheeled even closer, and for the first time Maya saw past the billionaire CEO to the man underneath, someone who carried his own scars, his own struggles, his own loneliness. I'm doing this because yesterday you gave me something I haven't felt in months. Hope. A reminder that goodness still exists, that people still help each other without agendas. And because, Maya, I spent 6 months after my accident watching people treat me differently, watching doors close, watching colleagues and even friends look away because I wasn't useful to them anymore. I learned what it feels like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to fight alone. And you, someone who fights alone every single day, stopped to help me anyway. That's not something I can ignore. Maya felt the tears fall now, couldn't stop them, didn't want to. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Richard smiled, and it was genuine, full of warmth. Then you'll learn and try again. That's what we all do. But Maya, I don't think you will fail. I think you're going to surprise everyone here, including yourself. So what do you say? Are you willing to take this chance? Are you willing to step into a life you deserve? Maya looked down at the contract, at the numbers that could change everything, at the opportunity that felt like a dream she didn't dare believe in. She thought about her mother, about the dreams they'd shared, about the life that had been stolen by illness and circumstance. She thought about the studio apartment with the broken heater, the endless shifts, the exhaustion that lived in her bones. And she thought about the man in the wheelchair in the rain, about the choice she'd made without thinking, about how sometimes one moment of kindness could ripple out in ways you never imagined. She looked up at Richard Westbrook, at this powerful man who saw something in her she'd stopped seeing in herself, and for the first time in years, Maya allowed herself to feel hope. Real hope. Terrifying hope. Yes, she said, her voice steady now, strong. Yes, I'll take the chance. Richard extended his hand, and when Maya shook it, she felt the weight of that moment settle around her like a promise. This was the beginning of something, the start of a journey she couldn't yet see the end of. But for the first time since her mother died, Maya felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. More than okay. Maybe she was going to become the person she was always meant to be. And it all started with one act of kindness in the rain, one moment when she chose compassion over convenience, one decision to help a stranger that turned out to be helping herself find her way home. 3 months later, Maya sat in a conference room on the 20th floor of Westbrook Industries, surrounded by executives in tailored suits discussing quarterly projections and market expansions, and she could barely recognize the person she'd become. Not because she'd changed who she was at her core, but because she'd finally been given the space to grow into who she was always capable of being. The navy blue funeral dress had been replaced by professional attire that actually fit, purchased with her first paycheck along with a proper winter coat and boots that didn't leak when it rained. The studio apartment with the broken heater was now a one-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with heat that worked and windows that didn't rattle in the wind. But more than the external changes, something had shifted inside her, something deeper and more profound than mere circumstances. She'd discovered that she was smart, not just survival smart, but genuinely intelligent, in ways that mattered in boardrooms and strategy sessions. Richard had been right. The technical skills, the corporate language, the systems and processes, those could be taught, and she'd absorbed them like someone starving finally given food. But what she brought to the table, what made senior executives stop and listen when she spoke, was perspective. She understood struggle in a way none of them did. She understood what it meant to make impossible choices, to weigh every dollar, to know that one mistake could mean the difference between eating and going hungry. And that understanding, that empathy born from lived experience, made her invaluable in ways a business degree never could. Richard had kept his promise. He'd mentored her personally, spending hours teaching her not just about running a company, but about leadership, about integrity, about using power responsibly. He'd introduced her to people who'd spent decades building empires, who'd shared their wisdom freely because Richard vouched for her. He'd challenged her, pushed her beyond her comfort zone, and caught her every time she stumbled. But more than that, he'd believed in her when she didn't believe in herself, and that belief had become a foundation she could build on. And slowly, day by day, Maya had started to see herself through his eyes. Not as a charity case, not as someone who needed saving, but as someone with value, with potential, with something real to contribute to the world. But the transformation wasn't just Maya's. Something had shifted in Richard too, something the entire company had noticed. The accident that had put him in the wheelchair had made him bitter, angry, withdrawn. He'd pushed people away, snapped at assistance, ruled through fear rather than inspiration. But after that day in the rain, after bringing Maya into his world, something softened in him. He smiled more. He listened better. He started initiatives within the company focused on hiring people from disadvantaged backgrounds, creating programs to identify talent in places others overlooked. He established scholarship funds for students who'd lost parents to illness, internships for young people aging out of foster care, mentorship programs that paired executives with kids from struggling neighborhoods. "You changed me," he'd told Maya one evening, long after everyone else had gone home, the two of them working late on a project. "Made me remember why I started this company in the first place. It wasn't about the money or the power. It was about proving that business could be a force for good, that success and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. I'd lost sight of that, but you brought it back." Maya had looked at him, this man who'd given her everything, and realized the gift hadn't been one-sided. They'd saved each other that day in the rain, in different ways, both drowning in their own versions of despair, both needing to be reminded that connection was possible, that kindness mattered, that one person could make a difference. The conference room meeting wrapped up, executives gathering their materials and heading out. Maya stayed behind, reviewing notes, when Richard wheeled over to her side. His physical therapy was progressing, doctors cautiously optimistic that he might walk again someday, but for now the wheelchair remained part of his reality. He didn't seem to mind it anymore, had stopped seeing it as a symbol of weakness, and started seeing it as a reminder of what mattered. "I have something to tell you," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made Maya look up. "Next month, I'm announcing a new division of the company, Westbrook Foundation. We're committing $500 million over the next 5 years to programs that identify and support talented individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. Scholarships, job training, mentorship, housing assistance, whatever it takes to give people a real chance." Maya's breath caught. $500 million. That could change thousands of lives, maybe tens of thousands. "Richard, that's incredible," he smiled. "And I want you to run it As director, you'll build the team, develop the programs, make all the key decisions. You understand what these people need because you've been there. You know what real help looks like versus what just makes privileged people feel good about themselves. I can't think of anyone better suited for this." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes for what felt like the 100th time since she'd walked into this building 3 months ago. Director of a foundation with $500 million to distribute? Her? The girl who'd been eating day-old sandwiches and couldn't afford to fix her heater. "Why do you keep giving me these opportunities?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why do you believe in me this much?" Richard reached out and took her hand, the gesture paternal, warm, genuine. "Because Maya, you represent something this world desperately needs. Proof that circumstances don't define potential. Proof that kindness isn't weakness. Proof that the person struggling today could be the leader who changes everything tomorrow if someone just gives them a chance. You're not just good at your job, you're good at being human, and in a world that too often rewards the opposite, that's revolutionary." He paused, his grey eyes intense with emotion. "But more than that. Because you helped me when I needed it most, and you asked for nothing in return. That's not a debt I can ever fully repay, but I can honor it by making sure others get the chances you should have had all along." Maya wiped her eyes, laughing through the tears. "I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll take this role and use it to change lives the way yours was changed. Say you'll be the person you needed when you were drowning." Maya nodded, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Yes, absolutely yes." Richard squeezed her hand once and released it. "Good. Then let's get to work. We have a lot of lives to change." As he wheeled away, Maya stood alone in that conference room, looking out over the city below. The millions of lights representing millions of stories, millions of struggles, millions of people just trying to survive another day. And she thought about the girl she'd been 3 months ago, soaked to the bone, helping a stranger up a ramp because it was the right thing to do, never imagining that moment would be the hinge on which her entire life would turn. The truth was, kindness had always been her greatest strength, even when the world tried to convince her it was weakness. Compassion had always been her superpower, even when it seemed to cost her everything. And now, finally, she had the resources and platform to prove that those qualities weren't just nice to have but essential for real change. She would build programs that didn't just hand out money, but invested in people, that recognized potential over pedigree, that understood struggle was often the forge that created the strongest leaders. She would find the other Mayas out there, the ones working 2 jobs and barely surviving, the ones who'd sacrificed their dreams to take care of others, the ones who helped strangers in the rain because they remembered what it felt like to need help. And she would give them what Richard had given her. A chance. Not charity, not pity, but genuine opportunity paired with belief, resources paired with respect, doors opened not because of who you knew, but because of who you were. That evening, Maya left the office as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She stopped on the sidewalk where 3 months ago she'd stood in the rain, where she'd made a choice that changed everything. A young man was sitting there now, maybe 19 or 20, clearly homeless, holding a sign that read, "Anything helps. God bless." Most people walked past without looking, the same way they'd walked past Richard in his wheelchair, the same way they walked past anyone who reflected back the uncomfortable reality that life could be brutal and unfair. Maya approached and crouched down to his level. "Hey, what's your name?" He looked up, startled, suspicious in the way you get when you've been ignored too many times. "Jake. Jake, I'm Maya. Listen, I work for a company that's starting a new program to help people get back on their feet. Job training, housing assistance, support services. Would you be interested in learning more?" His eyes filled with tears, and he nodded, unable to speak. Maya handed him her card. "Come to this address tomorrow at 9 a.m. Ask for me. We'll figure this out together, okay? You're not alone." She stood up and continued walking, and as she did, she felt her mother's presence so strongly it was like she was walking beside her. "This is what we dreamed about, baby girl," she imagined her mother saying. "Not the money or the title or the fancy office, but the chance to make a difference, the chance to be the help someone desperately needs. You did it. We did it." And Maya realized that the story wasn't really about her and Richard at all, not in the end. It was about what happens when people choose compassion over convenience, when they see humanity in strangers, when they help without calculating the cost. It was about the ripple effects of kindness, how one act of grace could cascade into thousands more, how changed people change people, how being seen and valued could unlock potential that transformed not just one life, but countless others. Richard had seen her, and now she would spend the rest of her life seeing others, really seeing them, the way she'd once desperately needed to be seen. This was the journey of one soul. But so many others wait to be told, wait to be seen, wait for someone to believe in them the way Richard believed in Maya. If you've ever felt the pain of lost connections, the weight of invisible struggles, the power of one moment of kindness that changed everything, join our community. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and maybe, just maybe, your own story. Together we celebrate the essence of life and the bonds that unite us. Because in the end, we're all just people trying to survive, trying to connect, trying to matter, and every single one of us deserves the chance Maya got. The chance to be seen, the chance to be valued, the chance to become who we were always meant to be. And it all starts with one moment, one choice, one act of kindness in the rain that reminds us we're not alone, we never were, and together we can change the world, one life at a time.